I get emails from people all the time being like, I really want to go to XYZ and I, been waiting for someone to go with me and nobody will go with me. Do you think I should go myself? And I'm always like, yes, of course.
Welcome to the Budget Minded Traveler Podcast, your source for the tips and tactics that will inspire and equip you to travel the world. And the best part, it won't break your bank. And now, the Budget Minded Traveler herself and your host, Jackie IRL.
Hey everyone, we have officially made it to episode 60 of the Budget Minded Traveler podcast, and today we are sitting down with Miss Amanda Williams, who is a solo traveler, continuing with our theme, and blogger at A Dangerous Business. And if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, you may have noticed something familiar about that title. Anyway, what's really cool about Amanda is that she blogs about solo travel all the time. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is on her blog in one way or another. And that means that if you find it interesting or like what you hear, there is a whole lot more where it came from. And I have a feeling you're going to like Amanda anyway. She is just a small town Ohio girl turned world traveler, and she has a lot of really great advice to share. So let's go ahead and get right into it.
We're so grateful to Osprey Packs for partnering with us and supporting the podcast, so please stay tuned for more about them later on. I have an opportunity for you to join me in real life for some real travel. Here's the latest Jump Adventures update. We are going to Greece for a bike and boat island hopping adventure this May 9th to 16th, 2025, and we still have space left. Check out jumpadventures.com to learn more and book now. We're going to have a yacht all to ourselves with ensuite cabins on board, so you get to sleep in the same bed every night as we start in Athens and make our way west toward the island of Corfu. You'll have your own bike for the week, e-bike if you want one, for cycling the islands as we go, in between meals crafted by our private chef on board, and all the relaxing you want to do on the top deck under the Mediterranean sun. These bike and boat adventures are our most carefree and relaxed trips. All you have to do is say yes and show up, and there's still space. Head over to jumpadventures.com to grab your spot now, and we'll see you there.
All right, I've got Amanda Williams on the line. Amanda, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself?
I am good. Thank you for asking. Where are you right now?
I am at home in Ohio. We just got the first major snow of the winter, which is pretty exciting and really out of character for Ohio in winter. But that's where I am right now. I'm almost snowed in.
Oh my gosh. Wait, so you don't normally get snow there?
No, we do usually get snow, but we usually start getting snow in about October or November at least. And we literally didn't get any snow until January this winter, which was crazy.
That's so crazy. But for me, that's woohoo. I don't know. I mean, I'm from Montana, and whoa, the winters there are crazy. And this year, I'm happily sitting in Germany, where it's okay, it's not perfect weather, but it's not snowy, and I'm happy about that.
Exactly.
Okay, let's start first by, I can't hold this in any longer. Your blog is called A Dangerous Business, and I love that so much.
Yes.
Because I am a huge Lord of the Rings nerd fan, and I mean, as soon as I heard the name of it, I thought, I wonder if that's why, that's what it's from. And then when you click on it and actually go to the page, it's obvious because you got the little illustration, and it's she's walking out of the Shire, and I love it.
I'm a really big nerd too, and I love it when people get where it's from automatically, because a lot of people don't. They have no idea where it's from, and so that's why I have quote on the homepage and the illustration to hopefully hint at, I'm not really writing about dangerous things. It's just from a quote.
I love it. I'm actually going to read the quote so that if anybody has no idea what we're talking about, they'll clue in right now. It's a dangerous business going out to your door. You step onto the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no telling where you might get swept off to. And that's actually, Bilbo says that in the movies. That's a J.R.R. Tolkien quote from The Lord of the Rings. And I love it. I'm nerds unite. Yay.
Yes.
And it's such a beautiful illustration too. You guys have to go to it. It's dangerous-business.com. That's Amanda's travel blog.
Yes. And the illustration was actually done by a fellow travel writer, blogger, illustrator. Her name's Candace. And
Candace who?
Candace Reardon.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. I know her. She does the T-Bex illustrations and all that. And very cool.
And she has her own like illustrated things as well. She's awesome. And so she did my illustration.
Very cool. Good one. I love it. It's beautiful. So now that we've fully gone into Lord of the Rings here, why don't we talk about the actual blog and talk about you? Why don't you tell us who you are and where you come from? We know that you're from Ohio, but what's your story?
Correct. Yeah. So I'm from Ohio. I grew up in a pretty small town, went to a really small high school, you know, kind of the typical Midwestern girl growing up type of background, I guess you could say. I got a degree in journalism in college in Ohio. Again, I pretty much I didn't really leave the state very much when I was younger, which is crazy. A lot of people assume that, you know, I must have always been traveling or that my family must have traveled a lot, and that's how I kind of got the travel bug, but it's not necessarily the case. I actually didn't even leave. Well, I guess I made like trips to Canada and that sort of thing when I was younger, but my first big trip was the year I graduated high school. And going back to the Lord of the Rings connection, that trip I went to New Zealand with my mom, and we did a Lord of the Rings tour of New Zealand.
Oh,
and that was
you've done that? That's so awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome. And yes, the nerd in me just, you know, like almost died. But that was really my first big trip out of the country. And I was 18, almost 19 at the time. And it just definitely kind of instilled in me that desire to travel and see the world and learn new things about different countries and cultures and that sort of thing. So I got a journalism degree and I started working at a newspaper out of college. I traveled a little bit then, but when I was working at the newspaper, that's when I decided to start a travel blog. So I was actually working as a copy and layout editor. So I was editing stories and designing pages of a newspaper and stuff, which, I mean, is kind of cool. But for someone who's always really loved to write, it wasn't necessarily very fulfilling just because I didn't get that opportunity to write or tell stories or anything. So I decided, I'm going to start a blog because that was kind of, you know, the thing to do 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah. And so I decided to start a travel blog because I had traveled a little bit and obviously had like been to New Zealand, and I actually studied abroad in New Zealand when I was in college. So I had a lot of like stories to tell about New Zealand. So I started there and it just kind of like took off. And then after maybe about a year or so of blogging, I decided to go back to school, and I actually got my master's degree in tourism management. Oh, wow. So that kind of just, I guess, reinforced my love of travel and tourism, and I used all the time off that I had from grad school to travel. And then when I was done with school, I kind of just decided, you know what, I may just give this blogging, freelancing thing a try, which I did for about 6 months, and then I pretty much went broke because freelancing isn't quite as easy as a lot of people assume it is. Yeah. So now I'm based in Ohio. I gave the long-term travel thing a go, and it wasn't really for me. You know, it's one of those things that's not necessarily the right type of travel for everybody. Some people who are digital nomads and all of those buzzwords and things, who are constantly on the move, or they live abroad or whatever, that's awesome. And I totally thought that that's what I would want to do, but it turned out that, traveling that fast is just, well, for me, when I travel, I definitely have a problem where I try and like stuff too much into a short period of time. Yeah. So I get burnt out really, really quickly, and I haven't quite found a way to balance that out yet. So that's why I'm in Ohio. That's my home base. So I travel pretty frequently, but it's usually just a couple weeks at a time, and then I like to come home and, you know, sleep in my own bed and cuddle with my cat and hang out with my boyfriend. And so my style of travel is a little bit different, but I guess that's more or less my story. So now I kind of do a mixture of freelancing and some contract work, and some different ways to make sure that I have the time to travel and I can work remotely or work from home or wherever I happen to be, but still have that home base in Ohio to come back to.
Mm-hmm. I think that sounds like perfect. I mean, you say you're kind of struggling to like find the balance sort of. That sounds amazing. Cause I mean, I am on the other side of it right now. I'm the digital nomad on the go, and it's exhausting. Right. I mean, I love it.
It can be.
And I chose this, this is where I want to be, but it can be very exhausting. I mean, I've been staying with a friend in Leipzig in Germany for like over a week now, and we haven't done hardly anything. And I'm like loving life, it doesn't matter. Like the idea isn't always to be constantly on the go. I mean, we have to have time to, especially as, we're writing and working. I mean, you have to make time for that. Yeah. So how long did you actually last when you gave it a go, long-term travel?
Well, I had originally planned maybe like a 6 or 7 month round the world trip. Like I was going to spend a few months in Europe and then go to Asia and, maybe stop in New Zealand on the way home or something. And I only made it through 3 months in Europe. Mm-hmm. And after that, number one, I was pretty much broke because I'm sure, as you know, as a freelancer, people don't always pay on time. And, you sometimes get to a point where you literally are waiting for so much money in payments that you like have nothing to spend. And that's the point. That's where I was. And I was just exhausted from traveling way too fast. And I know that I was traveling way too fast, but I don't know that, like I said, for me, it's hard to strike that balance because when I go somewhere new, I want to see everything. I want to do everything. Mm-hmm. And it's hard for me to convince myself like, oh, maybe you should just like slow down for 5 days and not do anything. and I'm just like, no, I can't.
Yeah.
So after 3 months, I was really, really tired and almost out of money. And so I decided to postpone the second half of my trip, and I went home for the holidays, and it actually worked out really well. I did go to Asia later, but it ended up only being for like 2 months instead of 3 or 4 like I'd originally planned. Mm-hmm. But so some people might say, oh, you didn't give it enough of a chance or whatever, but I just kind of knew after those 3 months in Europe that it was just not really the right style of travel for me. I didn't enjoy always stressing about money or about, finding a place to stay in the next town like every few days.
You don't find that enjoyable? That's a joke if you can't tell.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
But some people do. They like, they kind of get a high off of that. I don't know if it's just like the kind of adrenaline that goes along with, you get to a new place and you don't know where you're going to stay and you don't know what you're going to do.
That's
and
cool
it's really
for like
exciting.
10 minutes.
That's what I think too. So for me, it didn't work out, but that certainly doesn't mean that like, there aren't other forms of travel or different ways to travel. So it was just kind of a matter of me figuring out what works and what doesn't for my personal travel style.
Definitely. So did you take that trip by yourself?
I did mostly, yes. I'm trying to think. My very first trip to Europe, I actually traveled around Europe for 2 months, but I did a couple of small group tours on my own. Mm-hmm. And then that 3 month stint in Europe was, mostly on my own. I did, I want to say one group trip in the Greek islands, but again, it was on my own. So, that's something that's always interesting to talk about with people because when they hear solo travel, they assume that you're just like, if you're traveling solo, you always have to be by yourself. Otherwise, it's not solo travel.
Yeah.
Which isn't necessarily true. Like when I travel by myself, I like to do stuff in small groups. So I've traveled with like Intrepid Travel. I've traveled with Bus About, which is kind of a neat concept. It's like a hop-on, hop-off bus service all around Europe. So when I was there for those 3 months, I actually traveled with them for about a month. But it's like you kind of just book the buses as your transport, and then you can spend as long as you want in each city. Mm-hmm. But it was kind of neat because it let me – I got to meet people on the buses who were going to the same places I was, and it was kind of just a nice way to be alone, but yet not really have to worry about how you're going to meet people or anything like that. So yeah, it was mostly solo, but solo sometimes with other people, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, totally. Actually, that's, I really think that's a recurring theme of solo travel. I think it's one of the major themes of solo travel is that you're actually with people a lot. And it also kind of depends on where you are. I think there are some destinations that lend themselves a little easier to getting into group travel, whether it's organized or not. But Definitely. It's funny that you mentioned Busabout because I actually traveled with them this summer and I did a couple of their, organized tours, not the hop on, hop off that you're talking about, which sounds absolutely brilliant to me because...
Yeah, it was great. It was I thought it was a lot... Well, I can't actually speak to this because I haven't done like a rail pass or anything in Europe, but for me, it was fantastic because like I said, you were automatically meeting people on the buses and those people were going to the same places as you. So, you kind of had like a built-in network of people that you already knew and that you could hang out with. Whereas, if you're traveling around Europe by train or maybe on your own by buses, I think it can be a little bit harder to meet people, especially if you're on the shy side, like I tend to be.
Yeah.
So yeah,
okay.
It was great.
Yeah. And did you do any of their organized tours as well?
I did on my very first trip to Europe. I did one of their Eastern Europe tours, but I didn't do any of the ones that were on their like hop on, hop off routes.
Which one in Eastern Europe did you do?
I forget the name of it, but it went from Istanbul to Split, Croatia. So we went through like Greece and Albania and Montenegro. And
like the classic Balkans tour, I think maybe that was called something like that.
Maybe.
Yeah, I did. I went sailing in Croatia with them for a week this summer, and then I did the one that goes from Split to Istanbul, so the backwards of basically
the reverse.
Except you went through a different, like you guys went through Greece, and we didn't go take that route. But oh my gosh, I remember thinking this is. I jumped on this when you said it because I think this is a brilliant point for solo travelers. Is that seriously, I've had some really fun trips throughout my travels, and Busabout was right up there. I had so much fun on those. I did it for 2 weeks back to back, and you find that a lot of the people on those trips will do them like back to back, or they'll jump off for a week and then they'll jump back on in a different place or whatever. You like see people, you're making friends and moving on to the next place. I would say, if anybody who's listening to this hasn't heard of Busabout and is interested in not traveling alone, but taking a trip by yourself, look into that because it's also very affordable, I think.
Yeah, it is. And you are mostly like staying in hostels and that sort of thing if you're booking stuff through Busabout. But you can also, if you don't want to stay in a hostel, you can stay wherever you want and still kind of get that vibe of still traveling with other people, especially on the hop on, hop off routes. I think that's one of the most fun ways to see Europe, especially if it's your first time. And yeah, a lot of the people that I was traveling with were doing the hop on, hop off like all summer pretty much. And then they were booking some of the guided tours because a lot of the hop on, hop off routes will match up with some of their guided trips, like their Italy trips or their sailing trips and that sort of thing. Or if you're going in the fall, you could do Oktoberfest and all this other cool stuff. And on the buses, they're always telling you what kind of festivals and events and that sort of thing is coming up. So yeah. Now we kind of diverged.
I know we totally did. I'll put a link and some information to Busabout on the show notes page. But yeah, that's because I wrote all about my trips there and with them, and I had such a good time. So that's definitely legit. I would highly recommend doing that. That's just a good tool, because sometimes it is scary. And if you know that there is an affordable, like cool group of people going, or cool tour group, going where you want to go, it's definitely okay to say, I want to take a solo trip, but I don't really want to go alone. Let's, like if you need, and I don't want to say that like people aren't resourceful or can't handle it, but if you need a hand, kind of like it's like they kind of just hold your hand a little bit. And that can be really comforting if it's your first trip or you're not very experienced with travel. So it's definitely a great resource.
There's absolutely like nothing wrong with that. And in fact, sometimes when I'm traveling alone, I like to mix it up and add in like a small group trip here or there, just because, you know, when you're just completely by yourself all the time, like you kind of get into a routine with yourself, but you're not necessarily interacting a lot with other people if you're just, you know, 100% on your own. So it's nice sometimes, like you said, just to have a group of people that you're guaranteed to be hanging out with. And I found too, with a lot of the tours that I've done, that almost everybody who books them, whether it's like a trip with Intrepid Travel or G Adventures or Bus About or any of the other group stuff that I've done, people who tend to book that sort of thing, they all kind of have very similar attitudes and outlooks and interests. I mean, everybody there is interested in traveling and interested in seeing the places that you're visiting. So you kind of automatically have stuff to talk about.
Yeah,
and
instant friends.
Exactly, instant friends. And then, of course, the nice added bonus of having somebody else worry about, you know, how you're getting to your accommodation or like how you're getting to the next city. It could just kind of be a nice break from traveling completely on your own. So that's another way to look at it. I mean, it's great for first-time solo travelers, but it's also nice, personally, I think, if you just kind of need a break and you want somebody else to take care of the details for a while.
Absolutely. So now that we've gone down that rabbit hole, let's actually touch on the whole traveling alone part, because that is a big thing. And I mean, I'm sure you agree with this, but the reason that most people, I would say, travel alone is maybe not necessarily because they're, you know, hell bent on, I don't know, I guess I can say that on my own show, on like, you know, traveling alone and doing something for themselves. But most of the time it's because somebody else just won't go with them. You know, they can't find the right person or, you know, who has the right amount of vacation or wants to go to the same place. I mean, it's hard to find travel buddies. And so we end up taking these trips by ourselves, right?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I get emails from people all the time being like, you know, I really want to go to XYZ and I, you know, been waiting for someone to go with me and nobody will go with me. Do you think I should go myself? And I'm always like, yes, of course.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest kind of hindrances to travel for a lot of people, is just that they maybe aren't confident in traveling by themselves, or they just assume that they won't have any fun unless they're traveling with somebody else. And so they just like put off these trips because, like you said, they can't find someone to go or can't find someone who wants to go where they want to go. And I think that's definitely a big catalyst for why people do decide to travel solo.
For sure. Do you have, I mean, I know you do because I'm cheating and I'm looking at your website, but do you have any places in mind particularly that you would advise for solo female travelers? I mean, maybe let's just say forget the female part, like just traveling solo. Are there any places you've found that are particularly easier or more fun than others?
Yeah, I think so. I've written about it a few times on my blog. I think if it's your very first solo trip, and the first trip, I mean, well, the first time with anything can be really overwhelming and daunting, whether it's traveling or, you know, driving a car or whatever it is that you're trying to tackle. So I think for first time solo travelers, whether you're female or male, there definitely are some destinations that I think are just easier to travel in, and mostly they're destinations where people speak English. You're not going to have any trouble getting around or like finding your way to a bus stop or hotel or anything like that. And this does mostly apply, obviously, to like Americans, Canadians, Australians, that sort of demographic of traveler. But some of my favorite locations to travel solo have been places like New Zealand, Scotland. Ireland is also great. Scotland and Ireland have some of the nicest people on the planet. They will always help you if you need help. I also really love places like Scandinavia. I went to Norway solo earlier this year, and it was a really cool place to travel. It's very safe. It's very easy to get around, and pretty much everybody speaks perfect English, probably even better than I do in some cases. So it was never really an issue. I never worried about a language barrier of any sort. Another place that I love to travel solo or with other people is Iceland. Iceland is like such a hot destination right now. Like it seems like everybody wants to go there, and it's for good reason. I mean, there's like amazing landscapes and really cool stuff to do, and the people are really friendly and easy to get along with and to talk to. But it's also a really small country, so it's not quite as overwhelming as like saying, oh, I'm going to go to Canada by myself. I mean, Canada is another great destination, but it's huge, right? You look at a map of Canada and you're like, oh my God, where do I go? Whereas smaller countries like Iceland or New Zealand or Scotland, I think are a little bit, not only are they easy to travel in, but they're kind of easy to compartmentalize and kind of decide where you want to go because they're not like huge and you don't have like millions of options. So those would be some of my picks.
We'll come right back to that. Let's take a moment now to thank our wonderful show sponsors. Osprey is the market leader in technical outdoor, travel, and everyday packs. And I've personally used Osprey packs since 2015. My favorites are the Fairview Trek 50 for multi-day hikes, the Cirrus 24 for day hikes, the Transporter Rolling Duffel 60, which is my trusty check luggage for faraway adventures, and of course, the countless packing cubes I use to organize everything that goes in them. We are proud to support each other on the podcast and beyond. We love getting outside, and we want to see more people outdoors. So find out more and join us at osprey.com.
I think that's a really good, there's a couple of things that you brought up in there that are really good points. First of all, the language barrier, and I actually want to come back around to that in a second, but the size of the country is a totally different thing. And I think where I have discovered the difficulty with this has been South America, for example, because the countries there are literally so big. Like they're just so big. It takes a long time to get from point A to point B. It's not as cheap to fly. Like there are logistical problems that present themselves in places like that, where in other places they're kind of completely dissolved just because of the layout of the country.
Yeah, and I think too sometimes, like I haven't been to South America yet, and part of that is that exact reason is that the countries are so big. Like I know I would really like to go to Brazil, but Brazil is so big, and there are so many places that I feel like I would want to visit that literally figuring out the logistics and like planning an itinerary stresses me out just thinking about it. So that's like one of the reasons I haven't gone there yet, because when you are traveling solo, I mean, one of the things that you have to kind of learn to adapt to is the fact that, you know, you are 100% responsible for your own trip, right? So you're doing all the planning, you're figuring out, you know, transportation and where the best hotels are and that sort of thing. And that can get really daunting if especially if you're not used to it, or especially, like you said, if you're tackling like a huge country where there's so many options. For me, that gets like overwhelming when there's just like so much to choose from.
Totally. I'm thinking, because I'm about to get on a plane to Argentina. Actually, I'm getting really excited. But I think what I was going to say was, in that case, if in my head, when I want to go to a country that's like so big that there's so many places, that's when I would say, okay, let's look at a tour, like an organized tour, and what does it include, and can I afford it?
I totally agree. And I also think too, if it's like the first time that you're visiting someplace, doing some sort of tour can be a great way to just introduce you to the country. You know, like if you really want to go to Brazil, but you are so overwhelmed at the thought of planning something, look for a tour that goes to maybe like 3 or 4 of the main places that you would want to go. And then that's like a great introduction to Brazil. And if you really love it, you can always go back some other time and like do it on your own.
Explore different parts.
That's certainly a good way to kind of like ease yourself into some of those countries that might be a little bit more overwhelming at first glance.
Yeah, or move there and stay for a little bit. I mean, that, because honestly, that's the other thing that comes to mind is if you can go and base yourself somewhere, I mean, it's kind of like seeing Europe this way, go and base yourself somewhere and take trips and visit all the different places. You can do that in one big country as well.
Yeah, definitely.
To get around. But, okay. So circling back to cause logistics is definitely one of the things with, making travel easy. But the other one is the language barrier. And I noticed that all of the places that you just mentioned are English speaking. And that's a really good point. If the idea of traveling solo does make you nervous, then you're going to want basically as much help as you can get. In a way, what I mean by that is if you show up somewhere where they don't speak your language, it's going to be harder to go out to a bar and meet locals and get into the culture. It's going to be almost impossible if you can't speak the language. And so thinking about it that way, if you're not really comfortable with the logistics yet, look at the English speaking countries and put those higher up on your list, because that will at least get you more comfortable, with the process.
Right.
And then you can kind of try and tackle some of the other places. That being said, though, there are a lot of places where, because basically my point here is they do not speak English everywhere. So just be really wary of that.
Right.
One of the other...
There are, of course, plenty of countries that are just really, really popular with travelers or with backpackers. If you want to go to Southeast Asia, Thailand is a perfect destination for our first solo trip in Southeast Asia, just because it has so much experience with tourism that, especially if you're going to the popular places like Bangkok or Chiang Mai, that even some of the Thai islands, people do speak enough English where you'll be able to get by, and there are tons of other travelers and backpackers and that sort of thing. So, there are some destinations that they're not necessarily English speaking, but they have such a reputation among travelers that you'll still be okay.
Exactly.
Like you said, if it is something that you're worried about, then pick a destination that speaks your native language, whether that's English or something else, and make that your first solo trip. It doesn't have to be, your first solo trip doesn't have to be to Kazakhstan or Romania or, somewhere that's a little less visited right now.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be if you're looking for ease, because or for confidence even, because anywhere that's going to be on the main traveler circuit is going to be where you want to go, I think, because anywhere that's off the beaten path is not going to be as easy. And I mean logistically. You walk out of the airport in Thailand and it's how would you like to get to your hotel? Here are your options. They just present themselves to you. It's so easy. You could trip and fall into the right taxi or something. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just very much set up for tourism. And so, that's another thing is if we didn't mention, I mean, obviously there's so many destinations, but if we didn't mention the place where you might be thinking about going, is it on the main tourist track? Because if it is, it's likely going to be really easy to travel there. And basically the way you tell is if everybody talks about it. Costa Rica is another one. A lot of people talk about Costa Rica. It's really easy to get around in Costa Rica to make it work because they're used to tourism. So that's a good thing to keep in mind.
Definitely.
So let's talk about, you have a really cool post on your site that I kind of want to actually highlight and go through. And we're going to link to this as well, because it's really, I think, comprehensive. But you basically wrote down your answers to 9 questions about solo travel. And I wonder if we can just kind of fire through these, because I love this post. So I'm going to just ask you some of these and we can just kind of talk about them, okay?
Sounds good.
So the first one might be my favorite. I might have to read your answer, actually. Isn't solo travel dangerous as a female? What do you say to that?
Well, obviously, by just listening to this interview, you probably already know my answer. But no, it's definitely not dangerous just because you're a female. And yes, this post is more geared towards solo female travel, just because it's been a really hot topic in the past year or so. And especially because I've seen tons of comments from people who clearly are not travelers, just kind of, I guess, automatically assuming that if I'm a woman traveling alone that I'm going to get murdered or, something terrible is going to happen to me. Mm-hmm. But it's really not the case. I actually hate the question, like, isn't solo travel dangerous as a female? Because it's like, it's just one of those like sexist things. Like people just assume females are weak or whatever. Now, I'm not saying that like travel isn't different for females, because it definitely is. I mean, I think life in general is different for a woman than a man. And I'm not just talking about, like every day-to-day stuff, but even just like safety-wise. I mean, there are things that I would not do on my own at home in Ohio. And so it's just, it's a matter of, when you're traveling alone as a female, it's not necessarily any more or less dangerous than doing something alone at home.
Yeah.
It's essentially the same. And actually, I think when you're traveling as a female abroad, people tend to want to look after you more, especially if you're going to destinations where maybe they don't see a lot of solo travelers, or especially a lot of solo female travelers. People will come up to you and they'll be like, oh, are you by yourself? And then if you say yes, they'll offer to like help you figure out where you're going, or maybe just have a chat with you. So I actually think it might be safer to be alone in a different country than alone like in the United States sometimes. But yeah, so I just basically tell people, especially women, when you're traveling alone, just don't do anything you wouldn't do at home. You're not going to go out to a bar and get drunk and then like take a ride from a stranger in Ohio, right? Yeah. So why would you do it in like Ireland or Turkey or anywhere else in the world? So it's just kind of a matter of just being smart and just not putting yourself in a situation that you wouldn't put yourself in at home.
That's great advice. And I am going to read the first part of this answer. It says, I actually hate this question. It's kind of like asking, isn't going to the grocery store alone dangerous? Because the answer, of course, is no. Traveling alone is not inherently dangerous, regardless of your gender. So, yes, perfect. Awesome. Okay. How do you keep your money and valuables safe? Let's just go through this one quick, because this, I mean, obviously applies to anyone traveling whatsoever. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you're alone.
Absolutely. But I think when you're alone, it's something you're more aware of, because obviously you don't have somebody to kind of like watch your bag while you go to the bathroom or, help you keep an eye on things. So it is like a really important thing to think about before you're going to travel anywhere solo. And even if you're not going to a place where, like pickpocketing or theft is an issue. I mean, there are some places where any tips you read about going to XYZ, somebody will mention, make sure to keep an eye on your valuables. But for me, I mean, there's a couple different things that I do to keep things safe. On travel days, like when you have to be carrying all of your stuff with you at once, I make sure that all of my really valuable stuff, so like my laptop and my camera and my main wallet, is in a bag that's like on the front of my body, or a bag that I can see really easily, so that it's just kind of like, in your sight line is always safer. Yeah. But I also will make sure I always bring a backup credit card and debit card and some backup cash. And I put that in a different part of my luggage than my main wallet. Just in case my wallet gets stolen, I have backups. I don't have to freak out about how I'm going to get money or whatever. I usually hide about like $100 USD somewhere else in my luggage, whether it's, I mean, some people really, really like to hide their money, their backup stuff. I just put it like kind of in a pocket that's like inside my luggage that would be very hard to get to if I'm just like carrying my bags around.
Yeah. I do the same thing. I do that too.
Yeah, just having backups hidden somewhere is great. When you're actually just like, walking around sightseeing and stuff like that in the city, I would just say, obviously, don't take anything. Don't take more than you would be willing to lose with you, I think is a good tip. So, you don't need all of your cash or all of your credit cards in your wallet when you're out sightseeing. You also don't need to bring all your electronics. You can put that in your safe in your room, or if you're at a hostel, make sure that you have a lock for a locker and just make sure that it's locked up safe. There are also like portable safes that you can buy that a lot of travelers will use in places like Central America or Asia, or where, you know, they might be a little bit more wary about their belongings left in a hotel room. And then, I don't know, I guess just like use common sense. Like if you're riding public transportation, whether it's like a subway or a bus or something, you know, don't be oblivious to your surroundings. Like, I mean, yeah, you might want to get out your phone and play on your phone, but don't ignore where you put your backpack, or don't.
Oh yeah.
You just want to be careful when you're in a public place where it would be easy for someone to take advantage of you not paying attention.
Right. That one I think is, yeah, don't ever put it down, even at your feet, because it might not be there at the next moment. I mean, and I always say, make sure that you have, that your purse or whatever it is, that it zips closed. And another thing about public transportation is if you are going to be in busy areas that are really shoulder to shoulder, and this happens a lot, you know, metros or even just busy, like piazzas, walking around places, plazas, whatever. I always use that word in Italian. But you can lock your bags closed with safety pins. So, I mean, if it's something that is going to, you know, because basically all you have to do is make them pass on to the next person, you know, make it difficult.
Right. Because a lot of times, yeah, when it comes to pickpocketing, I mean, it's an issue that is prevalent in just about any large city, no matter what country you're in. You're always going to want to be aware that that's a possibility. But generally, people who are pickpocketing, they will just go for the easiest target. So if you make it difficult for them, they're not going to bother, because number one, they don't want to get caught. And number two, they don't want to have to work too hard.
Right. So, no, it has to be quick and easy. So yeah, exactly. Don't make it easy for them.
You know, I actually often will use bags by a company called PackSafe. They make some really great, like, pickpocket-proof purses and backpacks and that sort of thing, where they actually have little, like, clasps and stuff to where you can't just, like, unzip the bag easily. Or, like, they make it with slash-proof material and that sort of thing. So even just investing in something like that is, like, a really, really easy way to help ensure that you're not going to be an easy target.
Brilliant. Cool. Let's go to the next one. I actually want to talk about this one. How do you deal with loneliness? This is such a brilliant question, I think, because it does happen. I mean, you can't say that it doesn't, right?
It does. No, it absolutely does. And I mean, I definitely like to go by the quote that, like, you know, being alone doesn't always mean lonely.
Right.
I think that's just a misconception in general. People think that, oh, you know, if you're single or if you're doing this or this alone, then that must be, oh, you're sad and lonely, which isn't true at all. And it's the same with solo travel. Just because you're doing things alone doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be lonely. But having said that, you know, when you're traveling by yourself, especially for an extended period of time, you definitely do feel that loneliness, you know, at least a couple times. You might get homesick. You might come across an evening where you really want to go out, or maybe you want to go out to dinner and you're just like, oh, I really, really wish I had somebody with me. And then, you know, sometimes you like go down into that pit of like, oh, woe is me. I'm so lonely. It happen. It absolutely does happen. Travel is not all rainbows and unicorns. But, I mean, there are some, like, really easy things you can do when you are feeling lonely. And some of them we've already talked about before, like just going on a group tour, whether it's for a couple days or sometimes, especially when I go to new cities, I like to go on walking tours.
Me too. Yeah.
Excuse me. A lot of cities, especially like in Europe, they'll offer free walking tours where you just, you know, go to a meeting place at a certain time and then go take a tour of the city with a bunch of other people. That's a great way to meet other travelers who are also new in the city. Or like I said, small group tours or day trips. I sometimes will book day trips just to like be around other people. What else? Sometimes where you're staying can definitely impact how you're, like, whether you're lonely or not. When I first started traveling, I used to stay in hostels most of the time, which, you know, is definitely a form of accommodation that people associate most with backpackers or like young college students and that sort of thing. But the fact of the matter is anybody can stay in a hostel. And these days, especially in Europe, I've noticed hostels are becoming more of like something that anybody can use. They have private rooms. They have hostels that are considered like luxury hostels now that are a little bit more expensive, but you obviously get what you pay for. Right. And so sometimes just staying in a more social form of accommodation, whether that's a hostel or one of my favorite ways to book accommodation now is through a site like Airbnb or like an apartment rental, where sometimes you can actually just book a room in someone's house or apartment. So like you automatically are meeting people, or maybe staying in a guest house where, you might share meals with the other guests. So just kind of thinking of ways to where you're not just like alone in your hotel room at night, right? If you are kind of in a situation where it's easy to be social where you're staying, that sometimes helps. What else? I don't know. I mean, sometimes it's just for me, I mean, I'm a pretty introverted person when I'm traveling, so I tend to actually enjoy time alone. But if I am, hitting a day where I just like am feeling a bit down or a bit lonely or just like I wish that I had somebody with me, sometimes I'll just go somewhere where there are a lot of people, maybe like go hang out in a piazza like you mentioned before, or maybe go to a I don't even know, go to like a sporting event, or maybe like a park where there's some live music or whatever it is, just like going somewhere where there are other people. Like even if you're not planning to try and strike up conversation with strangers, just sometimes being around other people can help you feel a little bit less lonely, and maybe you'll even stumble across something really cool in the process.
Yes. I love that. And actually on that note, do you have any, like, what is a cool thing that has happened to you because you were alone that you don't think would have happened otherwise, like a success story like that?
Oh man.
I mean, like, there was one time that I was in Costa Rica, and it was around Halloween actually, and there was a costume party, Halloween style party, whatever, in a town nearby, but it was at night, and there wasn't, we were like in the rural area. There were no buses or anything at that time of night, but my friends were going, and they all have dirt bikes there. Like that's how they get around. So the only reason that I got to go is because I was one person and I could fit on the back of a bike, like if I had people with me, we would not have been able to go because there would not have been enough like space, and I mean, we couldn't walk there. It was like 10 kilometers away or something like that. And instead I got to go and be part of this really cool experience on Halloween, just something that I hadn't done before in, a foreign country. And actually, that was a lie. I've done it before, but I mean, you know what I mean? Like it was cool. It was a fun experience that I was by myself. I mean, just recently I got to go to dinner with like 6 people who were speaking languages all other than English. And if someone else was with me, it wouldn't have been as fun because of the language thing, because it was so fun to like learn some Romanian words and try and speak German. And one of the ladies spoke Italian. And I mean, my hosts that I was with do speak English, but it's not their first language. And so it was really fun to just like be immersed into the culture of the moment and trying to learn these language. I mean, I was sitting there mostly staring at everyone, just like trying to, my language brain, like trying to learn as much as I possibly could. It was so fun. But something like that happened to you?
Yeah, I mean, and there are just like little things like that happen all the time. Like,
Exactly, yeah.
I don't know what, like, when I was in Norway earlier this year, like I was eating dinner by myself. So I was like at, a table for one at this restaurant and stuff. And this couple that was sitting at the table next to me just like started chatting, and we like ended up talking for like 2 hours in this restaurant just about travel and like all sorts of different things. And I think, I mentioned before that I think when you're traveling solo, people are more likely to approach you and like want to talk to you and offer you like cool opportunities, like let's go to this Halloween party or whatever. Just because, I think intrinsically we want other people we meet to have fun. And I think, and maybe this goes back to that conception or that misconception of, you know, if you're alone, you must be lonely. So when other people like see a solo traveler, they're like, oh, poor solo traveler.
Yes.
Let me help you, you know, not be lonely. But yeah, I think traveling alone just kind of opens you up to more of those things. I mean, another one that I was thinking about, but this, I wasn't completely by myself. This was when I was on a small group tour in Eastern Europe. Excuse me. But me and one of the other people on the tour decided that we wanted to go to like a water park when we were in Bulgaria because it was so freaking hot. It was like, you know, like 97 degrees. And we had heard about this like hotel that had like a water, like, you know, a bunch of water slides and pools and stuff. And we're like, oh, we should go there. So we ended up walking all the way to the hotel only to find out that their water park was closed.
Oh, sad.
Which was kind of a bummer. But as we were leaving, we ran into this guy who had been our tour guide for a walking tour the day before. So he was a local. He was like from this town. And he was like, he was also headed to the water park at this hotel. And he was like, oh, crap. You know, like it's closed and stuff. And so then he was like, okay, well, I know of another one. Let me call my girlfriend. And so him and his girlfriend took me and this other guy out like outside the city, like half an hour to this like massive water park. He just like hung out with them all day and like went down water slides and stuff. And yeah, it's just like those little connections like that wouldn't necessarily happen maybe if you're traveling with a bunch of friends or,
totally.
You know, and just the fact that we like had met him on this like walking tour and fun little stuff like that happens a lot when you're.
It really does. And it's because you're more open to it, honestly, and you can't really help it. I mean, when you're with someone else, it's really easy to completely lose focus of all things except for that person because it's really easy to. They're your companion. That's who you talk with. That's who you eat with, everything. And so when you remove that, suddenly that energy, you know, gets expanded into the rest of everything else. And you kind of are much more, I think, present. Or at least aware of everything that's going on. It's a fascinating thing. You're
at least more like open to meeting other people and letting those like random things happen.
Right.
Yeah, like you said, when you're traveling with, especially like a significant other, and not that there's anything wrong with that. I love traveling with my boyfriend, like when he is able to get off work and stuff like that. But yeah, I definitely notice it. Like we just went to Iceland in November. And we did a couple of like overnight trips while we were there. And I totally did notice that because I was with him, I found myself talking a lot less to the other people in our group. Just because like, you know, I was really comfortable just chatting with him. And I was like, oh, I don't need to talk to anybody else. But I was like actually aware at one point, I was like, if I was here by myself, I would totally be talking to every single other person here rather than just like one person. So it is a totally different way of interacting with people when you travel.
Completely. It's crazy. And you know what? It's in that I think that whole personal growth thing happens. It's in that space where there isn't anyone else there. And so you're forced to hang out with yourself and see how yourself reacts to all these things by yourself, you know, and that it's powerful. It's powerful.
Definitely.
And you can really make it what you want it of it. I mean, solo travel can be anything you want it to be. It's crazy. It's really cool.
For sure. If you're the type of person who's like super social, like you can still be that way when you're traveling solo. Or on the other side of the spectrum, if you're a person that's kind of a little bit more shy or more introverted or who really just likes being alone, that's perfect for solo travel as well. Because it's totally up to you what kind of travel experience you have when you're on your own. You don't have to worry about like what your travel companion wants to do or see, or, you know, if they're like a picky eater, you don't have to worry about finding restaurants that they'll like. You can literally just make the experience whatever you want it to be.
Yeah. And you don't even have to be the way that you are at home. You can try new things because no one knows you out there. You can be whatever. It's really cool. So do you have one piece of advice that you would give to, let's go with females specifically, considering traveling solo? What would you say to them?
would say don't let anyone, especially the media, talk you out of it or make you feel scared. I mean, we already talked about this before, but I think especially now when the media is so prevalent. I mean, we're all on social media every single day. Whether you watch the news on TV or not, you're getting all the news on Facebook and Twitter and all of that. And you're seeing all the things that are that are happening around the world. And I think a lot of times, I mean, the media does tend to focus on the negative, right? So if something bad happens in a country, that's what they focus on. And they sometimes, I think, make the world seem really scary.
Yeah.
And it's not scary. You know, I mean, I live in the United States, and the United States, I think, is one of the scariest countries out there. You know, just in terms of what can happen to a person here.
Absolutely. You're right.
Lives here.
Yeah.
So to see all of these news outlets and stuff make other places seem so scary and make them seem so dangerous. I mean, the U.S. State Department issued a travel warning for like all of Europe after the Paris attack.
Right. Yeah.
Which I just thought was hilarious, but also kind of detrimental because, I mean, the alert didn't actually say, you know, okay, the world is dangerous. It basically just said, if you're traveling, you know, just be aware of your surroundings, keep an eye on your stuff, be conscious when you're on public transport. I mean, that's all stuff that you should do anyway. You shouldn't need a travel to tell you that. But just the fact that they issued an alert, I think, made Europe sound a lot scarier to people. And so some people were like, oh, you know, maybe I don't want to go there. Maybe I shouldn't travel there. And I think for solo female travelers especially, those sorts of messages are thrown at us a lot more forcefully because, again, we're women and we're taught that we are weaker and that we're not as capable as men and that, you know, we should be more scared of things than the opposite sex. And none of that is true, but it's just kind of what gets ingrained in our brains. And so when you couple that with somebody telling you the world is scary and dangerous and you should never go there, I think it makes a lot of women think twice. And so I would just say, you know, it's fine to think twice about it, but if it's something that you really want to do, don't let other people scare you away from it. Like, just do it, because I don't really think I know any women who have traveled solo who say that they regret it. You know, I just don't.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. That's awesome advice. And thank you for, I'm going to have to wrap this up. We could talk all day. I know we could.
I know.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing. And before you go, why don't you tell us one more time where we can find you if people want to follow you?
Sure. So my blog is called A Dangerous Business. You can just Google A Dangerous Business travel blog or just go to www.dangerous-business.com. You can find me on social media. My page is just A Dangerous Business on Facebook, and then on Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Pinterest, all of those other places, I'm just at Dangerous Biz, all one word, biz with a Z. So awesome. That's where you can find me.
Yay. Okay. Thank you so much. And good luck with your dangerous business going forward.
Thank you so much.
All right, there you have it. I know we went a little long. I really could talk about that all day long. As always, you can find the show notes for this episode. I'm going to link to the blog post that we talked about, plus some more information about Bus About if you guys want to hear it from me at thebudgetmindedtraveler.com/60. And don't forget to check out Amanda's site, A Dangerous Business. And also don't forget that if you ever have questions about anything travel related, head on over to the Budget Minded Traveler community on Facebook, which you can find through the page at facebook.com/thebudgetmindedtraveler. There are new threads started every day. We have well over 700 people in there now, so feel free to join the conversation there. And one more thing, next week we have 2 special episodes going live on the podcast with some very special guests, plural. So be sure to keep an ear out for those. Thanks for tuning in. You guys have a good day.